Okay, now I'm actually recording. So welcome everybody to the third-party app patching via FileWave, and this one is for the Mac. And tomorrow at the same time, we're going to do one for Windows. It just felt better to separate it because some people don't manage both platforms, and then we only really gave an hour to it. I'm going to try and stick to that, so everybody knows I can run a little long, but this will try and cover um, what you can do as far as patching third-party applications using FileWave because um, maybe you're new to it, but if there's folks that are really good at patching third-party stuff, like definitely, I would love if you chimed in. You can do it in the chat, or like I said, you could hit the little hand button down at the bottom of the screen and ask to speak, and that is totally welcome. So, okay, so let me get rid of this slide. And I wanted to start with just talking about, third-party apps, what we're going to talk about. It's not really OS patching that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about things like Chrome or Firefox or like Adium or some other application that you're trying to install. And I kind of thought about the different ways that you install things, and I've set up in my server um, like a few examples of how this can all play out. And we'll talk about a couple of things you can do to automate building these things. Because, I mean, basically, there's probably like every day of your life is a new version of something came out, and I need to be able to handle, updating it. And also, how do I know that a new version of something came out? So, there's a couple of tools that I will talk about. One in particular is Auto Packager um, and Auto Package, which can simplify, the whole knowing if a new version of something came out. And there's a couple of ways that Auto Packager can work. So why don't we start with the simple? Um, and so the simple is, let me go to, no, that was going to be, I want my example apps. So you might have an app like, Cocktail that you download. Um, and when you get this app, I, of course, have a ton of stuff here. So you get Cocktail, and you just have this app, right? And so you might wonder, well, how do I get this into FileWave? Um, it's not a package, right? And, whoops, I have a question. Can anyone not,
I can see
nobody's,
you fine.
okay. So Sean, there's a square for me. So the way this works is there's a little square for me, and if you click it, you can make it bigger. And if you click it again, there's sort of like a make it full screeny look to it. And if you don't see it, if you probably leave and then come right back in, you should see it. Okay, good. So, there's sort of this model where it's this drag in here in how am I going to install this? Then I have this other, example where they give me an Apple package. And, when I look at this, I get this PKG, right? And how am I going to install this? I would say that when you get it as a package, it is really, really easy. It's easier than you would think. So, for instance, I have my server here, right? And I have my macOS apps. So if I go and drag this in, well, it realizes that it's an Apple package and it's just in there. I mean, it's really as easy as that. But that would only be if it was a package. Now, the other thing is when it adds it, you want to think about how you're going to remove it from a system. So, it's not just installing it, but if you want to start really simple, if you have a package and you want to install it, it's as easy as this to, get it in there. Um, you want to think about things like if you need to change these properties, right? If let's say that this is only for Apple Silicon, maybe, or maybe is only for newer versions of macOS, maybe. So you want to think about the requirements tab, and if you want to control things that way, right? And then when you think about, does it need to check for anything, right? So this is just like, really any other file set in here. Really, when you're making file sets, you're probably making OS patches, you're making profiles for the Mac, you're making these third-party software installs. So if I go to scripts, these scripts run when various things happen. So requirement scripts, you could say, I need to make sure that something is in a certain state before this gets installed. Um, Verification scripts happen every time there's a verify from the client. Activation scripts are kind of like, run this to do the install. Um, and I can show you an example where it has the scripts. And this is a good example that Sean actually made, was the TeamViewer stuff, which I have in my FileWave official TeamViewer. So if I go to this one touches on a couple of concepts. So there's a requirement script, and this part is where it's not just drag and drop. There is some coding, but you can borrow from things in our knowledge base, and I'm going to try and make sure that we have really good examples in the knowledge base. So like TeamViewer's in the knowledge base. You can go and look at how Sean did this. It has a few good examples because, for instance, it checks if a profile is installed because we have a profile to handle permissions for TeamViewer, and we want to make sure that that profile is present. So he has a bit of script that looks for the profile. Then when it installs, with these switches because we have a configuration file. We're not just doing a regular, just silent package install. We're doing this with certain switches. So this is the TeamViewer in the KB is a good example of how you might do that because there are products like CrowdStrike that I'll show you that install with switches. So you're going to have to know how that application installs. I'll say for most third-party stuff, if it's not a paid third-party application, there's probably no switches. It probably just, installs quietly. But also, this has the uninstaller concept. So you can handle removal of things. So, if you look again at the TeamViewer app, you'll see how Sean handled removing TeamViewer. And it is important to always think about not just how something gets on a system, but how you might get rid of it, how you might cleanly get rid of it. But I'd say that making an uninstaller script is probably like a step more complicated for folks. And if you needed any help, I mean, on Discord, you can chat anytime about software installation. You can come to the open office hours we have. And you can also do paid professional services, and we can kind of help you with how to script it. And maybe when you do a couple with us, you'll feel confident, on how it all works. Because, like I said, you can kind of repeat how you use the code. So I just wanted to show that, and hopefully none of this part is really new to anyone. The fact that we have the scripts and the concept of an uninstaller being possible. Um, for uninstalling, one thing to think about with a package is you're not necessarily going to know like where everything installed to. Um, there is a neat utility that I've always used called Pacifist, and I think on my machine I don't have it licensed, so we'll just wait 10 seconds to show it off because I got a new machine and I didn't put my code in yet. Okay, so Pacifist, and I'm going to install that later, is kind of neat because you can open up a package and you can see like what's inside it, what it puts where. Um, I've always liked this because you can also view, for instance, the scripts that might be part of that package. So this one has a pre-install script of its own. Um, if you don't 100% know how packages work, I mean, that's another thing we could talk about, um, in Discord, because it is really good to understand. And you'll notice some things that are common between an Apple package and the format and the names of the scripts and the things that we call them in FileWave, because they are very similar, the scripts and their roles. So I could hit view file, and this is the script within that package. So whenever this package runs, it does this change. So you're going to want to understand, what does that package do to your system? If we were talking about something like Cocktail, well, the install is just a matter of putting it in applications. And making that installer is pretty simple because you can make, I could do an app or folder, right? And then I could pick it, and I could also go the route of, going in here and hey, here's applications, and then I can bring stuff in here if I wanted to. I could just sort of customize this up, and this stuff will install. I could do a couple of ways. Um, but doing this is manual, right? I have to go and download Cocktail. I have to go and download that other application. I have to remember, to check if there's new versions. A lot of software vendors will have email lists when they have new versions. I'd say for all your major applications, you probably want to get on their email list so you know when there's, a new version of something. But that's sort of the manual way. Um, and I wanted to show you an example in particular. CrowdStrike is pretty interesting, and I will make a KBR article about it because um, there have been folks that have asked me specifically how to install CrowdStrike, and I have this from helping somebody install it. And Peter, yes, suspicious package is a cool in the chat. Suspicious package is a cool plugin for the Finder that lets you view the insides of a package. And Sean shared some uh, tips too as well about seeing what's inside. I've just always liked Pacifist myself. So when we're looking at CrowdStrike, CrowdStrike is interesting because it has a profile for Intel and it has a profile for Apple Silicon. Now, it's easy enough to make it, and I believe I set this up correctly. No, I didn't. Yeah, no, sorry. It's easy enough to assign this, and I think I did it based on smart groups for the hardware type, because they have a profile for the type of hardware. But you also want to make sure that the profile installed before the software, because Apple wants you to have that. Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? That the permissions have to be set. That TCC profile has to be set before the application is present. Otherwise, they wouldn't be set the way you want. But to install this, maybe I'll show the contents first. This package, and by the way, I'm just holding down the Option key when I click on the triangle, and that makes it expand like that, so I don't have to dig, 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 dig. So this has a package, and it has two scripts inside of it. And the install is really handled by the two scripts. And if I look here, the requirement script, like I said, that runs before, it kind of checks like, should this happen? If I look at this, and I guess I'll walk through, basically I had two profile IDs that I was looking for, and this is not the best code. I'm going to probably clean this up. I was quickly putting this together, but basically I was looking, does this profile exist or does this profile exist? And, if one of them exists, basically it moves forward. And then when it does move forward, um, I don't know why I put it in post flight. I do know why I put it in post flight. Because the way that this was installing, it was running it as an Apple package, right? So I showed you when I drag and dropped that package into FileWave, it was running it as an Apple package as the installer. The post-flight script runs to license it at the end of the install. So CrowdStrike is installed, and as a post-flight, it runs this license command. So I guess this kind of combines installing something as a regular package, but also then customizing it afterwards with this bit of script. Um, Now, what I don't have in here, but I plan to add, is the uninstall script so that I could also use this. I could delete the association and get rid of the software too. Um, so that's missing from here. So that's why this isn't really finished up yet or posted. Okay. Um, this actually is a good example of installing Rosetta 2. If I look in this package, sometimes you will not have any package inside here. You won't have any applications that you're trying to install. This one is purely a script, and this is in the knowledge base. And if I go to scripts, this just has an activation script, and all it does is the command line with software update to ask it to install Rosetta. So this would be a good example that is in the knowledge base of how to do that. So you've seen like a couple of examples of the ways that you can handle installing. So you probably have to think about like make a list of the apps that you want to install or that are in your environment and maybe make a little spreadsheet of, you know, is it a package? Do I know how I know when new versions come out? Do I need to install it, with certain switches, right? And so then you'll have an inventory and you'll know, kind of where you're at with getting them in here. But there is another solution that will make a lot of this much easier. So there's a thing called auto package that I'm going to talk about um, that can automate some of these steps. And what I wanted to show you guys was first is in the Foundry, when you go to categories FileWave events, there is US Training Day that you all can see as of a few days ago. And if you go into that course and you scroll down, there's a lot of good stuff in here that I would encourage folks to watch. Um, but there is a section on using auto package to support third-party apps. And I would suggest, flipping through the presentation, there's a script here that can automate use of auto package. Um, there's some knowledge base articles that I'll show you as well. And this could be a big time saver. So in the Foundry, right, that's probably the easiest way to get started. You'll get to see the knowledge base articles that exist, but in the knowledge base, you can also search for auto package. You'll see that we talk about the URLs where auto package is, using auto packager with FileWave. There's a bit about some errors that you might encounter. And then for the purposes of automating the thing that was in that Foundry course, it includes a script that uses the FWAdmin command line interface to be able to actually create packages and upload them. There's at least two ways to use Auto Packager. Um, the first way would be using a plugin that we have in there that I'll show you, and then there's another way where you can kind of use a script to automate auto package and to automate the FileWave admin to upload. And you just have to decide which way works best for you. Um, and I'll walk through both of those. But I'll pause for a second and just check if anyone had any questions or anyone wanted to talk about anything or ask anything about what I said so far.
Josh,
Yeah.
I thought I'd just chime in here with over in this summer we intend to do some work in this particular category with AutoPKG, for instance, to a little more tightly integrated, so it's not, quite as much work to set up. So this is planned work for this coming summer, to kind of enhance this and have some more contributions on this front, just
Yeah,
from a product perspective.
cool. And let's see. So I'm going to bring up. Oh, and actually, that's a good question in the chat about dependencies being an option for adding profiles prior to a package. So that is a thing, and that's why, I mean, that is an issue. That's a thing. That's why in the TeamViewer file set, for instance, there's a good example of doing something via the script. It would be nice if, and I don't know if that's yet planned. I don't know, Tony, if you could say if having a script through dependencies, be able to say that, not a script, but to say a profile is present before a package installs. I don't know if that was already on the roadmap at all.
It's in the backlog, but we don't have it scheduled on the roadmap right now.
Okay. Oh, and I didn't discuss hidden files, Sean.
Do you want to do that?
No, no. If you had a bit to explain, you could, and if you want me to show anything, I can.
It's just be careful when you're even with just a standard PKG. If you've got that, for example, inside a DMG and you drag that into FileWave, all it's going to do is drag the PKG. But if you actually use terminal and have a look inside that DMG, you may find there are other supporting files. And there's a good chance that they will also need to be in the same folder as the PKG. So it's always worth having a look inside using terminal, for example, to see what is inside the DMG to make sure that there aren't other files that should be dragged in at the same time.
That is a good point, and it reminds me of the Cisco VPN. Cisco VPN, the way that it would install was it would have a package, and then the profiles that would be included had to be in the same folder as the installer, and it would just know to import them if it saw them sitting with it. So that could be a consideration.
Yeah. So you can still just drag the PKG in and let us make a PKG file set. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
But the thing there is that if there are supporting files that are required, they will also have to be dragged in. And so you'll have to use terminal. Obviously, the files will be hidden from Finder, so you'll have to make it so they're visible, such that you can then drag them in. And then the other item was regarding some of the software that you can use to analyze PKGs. Depending on what they do, depends on whether they'll list everything or not. The thing about the receipts is obviously it will show you what it's gone ahead and done. So it's an after the fact thing, but it should list everything that it's done. But there's one more step beyond that, is all it's listing is what's installed by the PKG. But of course, when you run the app, it might start adding more files. Right? It may put stuff in the user's library preferences, or it may start putting files elsewhere. Right? And so when you're trying to build your own uninstaller, it's all very well kind of going, oh, well, this is the things that are installed. Let's make an uninstaller to get rid of them all. Right? But you may find there's still files left behind from it actually being run. And so trying to identify those as well is kind of a bit of work. At the end of the day, it's always better if the person who developed the software actually provides an uninstaller PKG. It's worth having a look for that just to see if there is one.
yeah, yeah, or some kind of script that they publish. I will say that FileSet Magic is perhaps a way to discover, what changes are happening. Because you could even launch the app for the first time before you take the final snapshot, and then you'd get some more idea about what it's doing. A long, long time ago, there was something called Picture Taker, which was basically like FileSet Magic, and Tony and I used to use that all the time to capture the changes, not necessarily to package them up, because of course FileSet Magic is designed so that you could package up the changes, but I would use it more for like research and discovery about how it was working.
There's one other question that's come in, which was something we just Josh did touch on. Can dependencies be an option for profiles prior to a PKG? Right. There's a reason we don't do this in product. anything that is a profile is being delivered via MDM. We have no control over that channel. We send out an APNS request, which goes via Apple. The device eventually picks that up. And then when the device picks that up, it then talks to us and says, what did you want me for? And then anything that we've got listed, we then send. So a profile could be an example of that. However, with PKGs, Apple aren't involved in that process, and we have control over the whole thing. And the device checks in, we say you should install this, and it goes ahead and installs it. Now, if we were to tell the device we've got to wait for Apple to do its bit before you can install this PKG, if Apple have got any issue or if it takes any time, you're effectively stalling the client waiting for Apple before we install this PKG. So instead, no, we don't have a dependency you can do that with, but the file set that Josh showed you earlier uses a requirement script to achieve the same idea. So what happens is you put in a requirement script with the PKG, and basically it's looking to see, do we have a profile of that profile ID on the machine? If we find a profile of that ID, we will install. If we don't, we will wait 2 minutes and then try again in 2 minutes' time. So the client's not stalled. We still effectively have a dependency because the requirement script is doing that effectively for us, right? And it's just waiting till the profile is observed. And then once it is, the package will then go ahead and install. So it gives you exactly the sort of thing that you're after, but without having to use dependency trees and with us having to mess around with the fact that we don't have control over the Apple channel. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think that was good. Okay. So then I think I'll talk about auto package, although we have the knowledge base articles, of course. So I use auto packager, which is a front end to auto package. One thing to think about is that because Apple removed Python from macOS, when you install, I think our KB needs a little adjustment because it might lead you to install auto packager first, but you really want to install auto package first because auto package actually bundles its own copy of Python 3 for itself. So install auto package. It's really easy. It's in a package. And then install auto packager. And in the KB, you can see the links for it. And actually, I will put them in the text chat just so that makes it easier. This one's about the errors that you might encounter. So these should be helpful. Once you have auto packager installed, it will tell you, hey, auto package of a certain version's installed. It'll tell you when there's updates to auto package and make it really easy to install. I have a thing called FileWave Importer. That's a plugin that I'm going to talk about. And you can see that on the integrations tab. So auto packager is really nice because they will tie into even. I used to use it with the LandRev importer because once upon a time I used LandRev. But there's a bunch of plugins, including it can send files off to VirusTotal to try and make sure that you don't inadvertently package up something malicious. So it's really nice, and I set that up. You can see like where it's going to dump the files, and I made a little shortcut on my desktop so I can get to it really easy. When it builds things, it can send notifications like to a Slack channel, for instance, or a Teams channel to tell you that it's built something. It can send an email. It can build things on a schedule. So it's really nice. It's really nice. And there are a lot of what they call repositories. So the way AutoPack, this is a community solution. So there will be people like you'll see Rich Troughton has a repository in here. There will be people that you'll know from the Mac community who have repositories available. There's even a FileWave repository here. And repositories will have these stars, which is like a rating system, right? So the more stars you imagine, the more trustworthy possibly a repository is. Um, you want to think about, like, you know, if it's all the way at the bottom here with maybe no stars, you want to think about if you know that organization that published it. So that can be a consideration, because there is sort of that risk that the thing that's in here will not work potentially. But right now, I just have a couple of repositories in here, the FileWave one and two others. Um, those repositories give me a list of applications, and you can search within here. So if I was looking for Firefox, right, this will show me all the recipes, they call it, for Firefox. Um, Now, within recipes, there are different kinds of recipes. Recipes are just a set of instructions to tell AutoPackage how to build certain things, right? So there are download recipes, which it's like it sounds. It's just to download the Firefox, the latest one, as if you went to the website and clicked download. Um, there are these install. There is Monkey. Monkey is another way to deliver packages. And then there's this new package. And so you will see different things. You might see like a Jamf, I think, extension 2 for some things. But when I'm thinking about building these, I'm potentially thinking about getting the package. And I have a couple of these built. So I did pick the package. And I'm actually going to unfilter that. And these are the ones that I picked. So I picked Adium as a package. I picked Dropbox as a package. Um, this FileWave tool and Firefox is oh, sorry. This one is a FileWave type recipe. And I'm going to talk about that. But for the packages, the way it works is when it builds, it will build in this cache folder. So for instance, let's say I have the Firefox one. So when I build with AutoPackage, I will get this package in the cache folder. And like I showed you how I dragged in that other package, I could just drag this package into FileWave. Now, this package won't have any special scripts or anything for handling uninstallation, but if I need to install Firefox and I don't yet want to go through figuring out how to handle uninstall, I could bring that in. I could also, look at this with Pacifist or whatever tool I like, and see, well, what did this recipe build? Okay, it put Firefox in applications, and as far as resources, there's no scripts in here. So all it did was create a package that has Firefox in here. So if I wanted to build an uninstaller, if I just was considering what gets installed at install time, it's pretty easy to make something that would remove this. But you do want to think about if you want to clean up, like preference files that are left behind, or if there's stuff put in library preferences, um, like system-wide stuff, you want to think about that. And that's where something like FileSet Magic could capture, if you install Firefox and run it, you could capture with FileSet Magic what it did. But if you want to start off simple, you could just check the things that you find that you want to build, and then you hit Run Recipes Now, and it will go through and it will build the latest versions of things. And so this would be a really simple way to have the things checked that you use, and you'll have to do a little investigation into what repositories have the things you want. Um, and then when you get it, you may want to look with something like Pacifist, um, you know, and see what it's doing, just to be sure you understand what was built. Once you do that once, you'll feel pretty good about for the future just building the new versions. Um, it's nice that when it builds with the version number in there so that what version this was, and you can tell them apart, because the more I run this, like I ran this back in October for training day, and then I ran it again yesterday, and so I get newer and newer versions. And if I use this, then I could probably save myself a bunch of time, just automatically building the things that I want. I could do it by coming here and hitting Run Recipes, or the automatic part would be that I could let AutoPackage run just by itself Maybe I have a Mac Mini somewhere that's sitting that I use as like a utility box, and I could just leave this running, and it could just be building on its own. And I probably want to update the repositories before each run of auto package, because that way it'll have the latest information when it builds. Um, and and yeah, um, any questions so far about this mechanism? And Sean, anything that you think I didn't talk about?
Just me.
Well, you're the only one on stage right now, so. But anybody else, if you want to add to this, if you use auto package in some interesting way, I could definitely talk about it. Um, and you could say in chat even, is auto package new to everybody, or do you guys use it presently? Okay, new to us, used it occasionally, used it before. Okay. Okay, so, and just so everybody knows, I said it was community driven. It is free, and it is a community thing. So, you know, think of it like just like how Firefox is a community thing, right? New versions come out. There's a lot of people that care about it, but it is community driven. I guess is there's no person that you're paying a license to that you can say, hey, I'd really like this improvement, but you can, if you're a developer, you could write an improvement on your own, which is nice, if you would know how, or you can put a ticket in their tracking system and say, hey, I wish it did this, and then maybe somebody will think it's an interesting idea and add it. And it does support various integrations. I didn't show you this FileWave importer. I talked about it, but I didn't really do anything with it. FileWave importer, if I click on it, you'll see that it has my FileWave server, has this port, it has my FW admin login. Um, the purpose of this is to use recipes. If I go here, that are the FileWave recipe type. So you can see there's not a big list, at least not with the repository I have picked. And the FileWave repository is maintained, that would in theory, I guess, be built out by us. If anybody was to contribute to it, we'd probably be the ones to contribute to it. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention lately, but because recipes being the way they are, you could actually make a FileWave recipe even on your own for an application. You're not locked in to whatever recipes are here. Like nobody in this list, like Rich, is really smart, but he doesn't have special access to make an auto package recipe. You could look at his recipes, or you could look at the documentation on the auto package site, and you could make your own recipes in theory for your applications, especially if you had like an in-house application that you wanted to work out just automatically building new versions. You can do that. It has all sorts of things to support, like mounting a disk image and copying something out of it, or just fetching something directly from a website. Um, it's really powerful if you get into it. But at the start, maybe just use the repositories that you'll see, the ones with high stars. Look for things, that are here. If there is a FileWave recipe, what it will do is, I think I can do this with Cyberduck. I forget if I already have it in my server, but if I run it, let's see if I set this up to be successful. I can just even talk through what would happen. So it will make a file set appear. So that uploader, when it finishes building the FileWave file set, you would see the package would appear at the top level here. Oh, and here it is. So it's uploading. So that's what that plugin does. So quite nice that it would just create it with the version number. However, it doesn't really take advantage of revisions. So if anybody's looked at file set revisions, this Cyberduck here has an example with revisions. If I go here, oh no, this Cyberduck does not have revisions, but this Handbrake I know does. So you can see I have 1.5.1 and I have 1.6.1 as revisions of Handbrake. So that means that I could make an association with this file set, making it so that the default one is associated to my clients. And then I could choose when I want to move to the new version, I just change 161 to become the default and it would move to it. The one thing about revisions is it does make it quite nice that I have multiple revisions within the one file set, but when you move from one to the other, I think Sean will say that it does a removal of the previous one to install the new one. So in this case, for this file set, it doesn't have any uninstall script. So nothing bad should happen. But imagine I had an uninstall script and it did something destructive that I didn't want to happen between 151 and 161. I'd want to consider that in this. So this file set got created. And if I go in here, I can actually see that this put the Cyberduck app in applications. Oh, yeah, and in the chat, Michael brought up a good point that when you're updating things, things running when you're updating them can be a problem. It You'll see it most often with, I mean, Adobe apps. You'll see it most often with Office apps, and you can have a requirement script that you know that looks for if it's running and even kills it and even uses something like Swift Dialog to prompt them and say, hey, this is going to terminate in 30 seconds. There are ways to handle that as well. So that was a good point, Michael. So,
Yeah, can I
yeah,
just jump in with
yeah,
the so where the when you're transitioning between different revisions, as Josh pointed out, when you do it on a revision basis, it will act as if there's a disassociation and reassociation. Bear that in mind if we've given an example file set that's got an uninstaller in it,
yeah,
because the uninstaller will run because although you haven't changed the association yourself, a change of revision is effectively a change of association in the background. We're just handling it for you. Okay, so if you want to do an uninstaller, you will probably want to do that in a separate file set in a separate way so that when you really aren't using this thing anymore, then we run the uninstaller script. Because
yeah,
otherwise, you could be removing all these files from the user where they've maybe personalized them in some way. Right? If they're like library preference and ones, maybe they've now become personalized. You run in and installers remove them, they get a new version, and then it's gone. Right.
yeah.
Regarding the running thing,
The app running when you're updating it, which can be a
yeah,
problem for
well,
Office.
yeah. I mean, that's obviously something you need to look at. Some apps won't care. In fact, if you could probably do this on a case by case basis, and you could just test, right? Because some apps will
Yeah,
be essentially cached and just running. They're not overly complex. They don't bother calling anything inside themselves, and in fact, you won't even know about it as a user until you quit and then you reopen and go, oh, I've got a new app, right? But there are ones that will care, that will do strange things if you try and do this to them while they are running. Right? So it's kind of up to you of how you want to handle that.
and you probably, I guess, to some extent, the more complicated an app is, like Microsoft Office is pretty complicated. Uh, what I mean is that there's a lot of stuff that talks to each other. If you look through the Microsoft Office folder, there's like a ton of supporting files and things. Whereas Cyberduck is the single app that has a few resources inside it, but not much to change. But I always say, test everything because everybody should have a machine or even a virtual machine that you can install all your apps and your configuration to. And so that you can test the way that I used to handle, because I used to manage systems for a long time. The way that I did it was first I would mess around in my VM. My VM was fairly clean, and I would use snapshots to be able to roll back. Oh, like Michael just said, but I would use snapshots so I could roll back. Um, and I would apply the updates and see what it was like in that clean environment. But that clean environment is nothing like an end user machine that is, a mess from over time. It's just it kind of proves out, like, could this work in an ideal situation? Um, and so once I see that it at least works in a pretty clean situation, then I would always have like a patch testing group. So there were machines throughout my environment that were always the first to go. And I would do them, and then I would give it, anywhere from a few days to 2 weeks, depending on what the change was, how much of a risk to breaking my environment there was. Um, and I would tell them, the people who were involved in this patch testing group, they would get a note saying, hey, Microsoft Office is getting an update, just as a heads up, so they knew. And that way they would be aware to send feedback if something went wrong. Because, and you'll see this, um, people will encounter a problem, and you've probably done this yourself, and you think, that was a one-off glitch. That's just my machine. And I had like 20 technicians who each independently experienced the glitch that they each believed was just their machine, wasn't worth reporting. And then it turned out it was a problem when I rolled out that software. So, um, you know, whoever you involve in patch testing, have technical and non-technical users. Um, don't have like the CEO of your company as a patch tester necessarily, but you know, do see if there are others, and anybody who's mission critical to. I'll use FileWave as an example. If we have developers that are critical to publishing a new version of FileWave, I probably don't want their machine to be the early adopter one, especially as we're getting ready to do a release, because I don't really want something that would introduce potentially a problem for them. Um, but I am going to want to think about somebody related to development who would be similar to them, uh, who could be a similar experience. So I do my one machine, I do a few machines, and then I'll do not quite everyone, but I'll do a larger section of machines. Wait to see that everything went well, and then do everyone potentially. So having phases is important for this and for OS patching, because you can run into problems. So okay. So we were talking about that FileWave plugin on Autopackager, and it created my Cyberduck for me. And that could be super easy. A FileWave recipe, if you find them and they do what you want, or if you make your own recipes by looking at the FileWave recipes that exist and tweaking them to do the thing you want, that's definitely an avenue you could take. But in that Foundry course about training day, you're going to find there's also a script that I have on my desktop. Um, this script is really interesting. So if I go to my desktop and I run this script, now to run this script, in the script is a username and password for my FileWave server. And there's a video in the Foundry that walks you through this whole thing. It's very simple. The script leverages users shared FW auto package. So there's some files here. There's really just one file that you care about. It's this import list, which is a list of applications that I'm going to build with this. So if I want to do another thing, I could edit this import list via users shared FW auto package import list. And maybe I'm going to guess that there's a firefox.pkg. I'm taking sort of a chance, but I'm guessing that there is. Um, you'd get the names from AutoPackager, or well, from AutoPackage or AutoPackager, but the names are usually pretty straightforward and relate to what they show up as in AutoPackager. So now I'm going to go back to my CD, desktop. So I'm going to run this. And when I run this, if it actually works, which I think it will, it is asking uh, Auto Packager to, behind the scenes, it's asking it to build these Handbrake, BB Edit, and Cyberduck, and Firefox, in theory, if I got the name right. Once it builds it, it's using the command line interface to the FileWave admin. So I have to have the FileWave admin installed on my machine too for this to be driven. And then what'll happen is, if this all plays out correctly, it will create an additional package for Firefox. So right now it's probably going through checking if Handbrake, BB Edit, and Cyberduck are created before it gets to there. So I can talk to these three because I built these yesterday, and originally I built them in October. Um, so what it does is it will initially create a package that you'll see as 0 in size. There we go. So it did it correctly. So we're going to wait to see how that all plays out. But we can look at these while that's working its way through. So it will create a file set. And by default, you're going to see an empty revision. And I'll show you Firefox when it's all done, assuming it plays out correctly. And you basically delete the empty revision. It's just a quirk of the script. It could get improved. The nice thing about the script is you can make the script do whatever you want. In fact, it does a model update at the end of the process to make sure everything's committed. But you can make the script do pretty much anything. It's not that big a script, and it will tell you how to make your own. How to make your own script, I guess, customize it. Um, let's take a look at Firefox, which says that it's 0 bytes, but let's see if that's true. So there's an additional revision that's empty, and then there's this revision. So the first time, and this is really like a first time issue, there'll be this blank initial revision, and then there'll be the revision that actually has the stuff that you care about. So all you have to do is manage revisions, and then we're just going to get rid of the blank one, right? And so now, once I've done that, you'll see, hey, this has the Apple icon. It has a size. And so the neat thing is, if I run this script, if I run this script, maybe from a cron job, maybe it runs every day, what it's going to do is, when there's a new version of Firefox, it's going to make a new revision and add it to it. But it's not going to set the new revision as the default. So nothing will change in your environment. You'll just start to accumulate, and I'll show you from Handbrake. You'll just start to accumulate versions in here. And you can make the choice when you want to, for instance, associate 161 to a device to do a test. When you want to make 161 become the default revision. That way, everybody that has it associated as the default, if they have the default revision associated, then when you change 161 to be the default, that will cause the move to 161. So I really like this script because, if you can find all the packages that you care about, all the third-party stuff that you care about, that script could run every day on a machine that has FileWave admin and Auto Packager, and it could handle just continuously publishing new versions. And so then you don't even have to really watch out for, did Firefox publish a new version? That would be super easy. The script is really easy, and we can discuss it in Discord anytime in the various Discord chats that any of the channels. I guess did that make sense? And did anybody have questions about how that works? Okay, so far it makes sense. Okay, so, and hopefully, I know this was a quick overview. We'll have it posted to YouTube as well so that you can watch through it. But I was trying to kind of cover the different angles because there are a few things. You get files that you want to distribute, you get a package you want to distribute. Ideally, if it was in auto package, that would be, great. There are other tools out there, and if you're in the Mac admin Slack, um, there are a lot of channels there that where people support those tools. So even though we have our Discord so that we can make it a giant, FileWave, lots of FileWave topics. But I still participate in the Mac Admin Slack, and there are channels over there in Mac Admins that are worth checking out, and tools over there. Things like Nudge that can help you with OS software updates and the bits that are a little bit broken right now in Mac OS. A lot of people have been, seeing if Nudge can help. There's tools like Super. There's Installamator. Um, Installamator is pretty neat as well. Neat in a similar way to Auto Package. Um, the only thing with Installamator is a lot of times when you want to use it, it's because you're always going to like the latest version. At least the version of Installamator I looked at a few months back. But we also talk about Installamator in the Foundry presentation that's posted. So you might, another reason to go to Foundry and check out that training day, the US training day from last year. And yes, Sean, that's to be able to automatically upload. Yep, and yes, and to have something about scripting, I do agree that it would be interesting to have one of these sessions that really just focused in on scripting concepts. Maybe like just things to consider. Things like what shell should it run in? What language should I use? Um, you know, what are launch arguments or environment variables in FileWave that I can pass to the script? So maybe we'll set up a getting started with scripting kind of thing and try and put some materials together. And actually, Sean, I think in the European training day there was scripting best practices, which shows up in the US training day as well. So you may also, another reason to check out those two Foundry courses, the US and the EMEA training day courses, so you can see the scripting do's and don'ts, because that could be a good start. But we can have a session also. Okay, so we actually did this on time, which is kind of a first for me. So if nobody has any other questions, we could close out. I don't know if anybody had a last minute question, or Sean, if anything I missed. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up now.
All good, I think.
Oh, good, excellent. So then I will stop recording now.